Well, good day, and thank you very much to Kari Longman for joining me. She is speaking to us from the Netherlands. Kari has moved to the Netherlands just before lockdown. And just very briefly, Kari, where in the Netherlands are you and how do you find it in the Netherlands, living there at present?
Well, we moved to Utrecht, and that was quite a big decision for us as to where we would move, and it was probably going to be either Utrecht or Hilversum, and Utrecht seemed like a great place to be. Not that I had ever been here before, other than our kind of look-see for 10 days that we had a few months before, but it's very central. And it has a lot of history, and it's a sort of slightly smaller version of Amsterdam. And yeah, it seems to be a terribly popular place for people to be moving to. And although we were originally staying quite close to the heart of the city when we were renting, we now live in one of the more modern suburbs, which are very much growing, because Utrecht has been identified as one of the sort of growth hubs in the Netherlands. So it's expanding and expanding and expanding.
You do find the land to expand onto because the Netherlands is so small.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were in this area lots of weiden and just lots of fields and that sort of thing. And it is actually remarkable in a way how much space there still is. But of course, the one thing that one does experience here is that it's a lot more built up. So houses are narrow, generally about 3 stories at least, and yeah, they sort of pack in a lot of people in a relatively small space. But what they really are good at is their town planning. So for every number of square meters that are developed, they always have to take into consideration things like new schools that will be built, and libraries, and open areas for walking a dog, recreation, exactly, little sort of exercise spots where people can do exercise outside or take their kids to be in a playground. So yeah, it's extremely well designed. It doesn't have quite the charm of the inner city of Utrecht, but I mean, it takes us 7 minutes on the train to get to Utrecht Centraal and 20 minutes to cycle.
I do know that you're quite fit. You like your cycling. For those, I do want to say one of the reasons why I know Kari is we used to run with this, for the same running club in South Africa, despite the fact that Kari always beat me hands down in any race, including the comrades. But that's a different story. I'm not going to.
I didn't run barefoot though.
But you're a very good sports person. But Kari, how do you like the Netherlands? And latching onto that, I mean, you know, you have left behind something like a lovely club. I mean, it was a lovely club that you and I belonged to. You've left behind an enormous infrastructure of music. You're a very good musician. At the moment, I mean, you're not there as a musician. You are there as the principal business strategist for CGI, which is a massive IT company. But how do you find it there? I mean, are you guys happy there? You've got a family, you've got kids. It's a huge decision to simply just leave everything behind. You know, even crazy people like me, and just, I mean, I'm probably the easier one to leave, but there are people, you've left very good friends behind, people who are close to you. Are you happy there?
We are happy here, and I do think it was the right choice. But something that I often say to people is it isn't as if one decision is the right decision, is the wrong decision. So, you know, we've never ever arrived here with any sense of somehow thinking we're better than we were, or we are better than people who have chosen not to move to the Netherlands. We are happy. Things are extremely well structured and organized. Life is a lot more predictable. I do love things like the fact that I can go for a run. The other day I went for a run at 9:15 in the evening. And obviously the safety aspect of things, I tend to not talk about it much because it's a given, you know, people know that. So I always want to have a little bit, a slightly different sort of rhetoric. I sort of think about things, the byproducts of being in a very safe society. And those are things, for example, like the children arriving and getting bicycles, and being able to be agents of their own lives already at quite a young age. The fact that they, you know, could either ride somewhere or ride to the bus stop and take the bus and then the train. So they are so much more independent than they can possibly be in South Africa. And we're very grateful for that. Obviously, there are, as you say, so many things to miss. I really miss our wonderful running club. That is indeed one of the things. You just can't find anything quite like that here. I miss the mountain. I miss the sort of free-spiritedness that one gets in South Africa. So that word, the concept of free, is an interesting one because, of course, South Africa and Cape Town especially is a land of free spirits. It does allow you to be free, and yet one feels frustrated because things that you really want to do. So for example, I loved running from our house up to Rhodes Mem and then doing a circular route of about 10 Ks. And there was a point at which people said to me, but you mustn't do that. You are nuts. You're absolutely crazy to do that. And I felt very upset because I felt like people were clipping my wings and sort of discouraging me from doing things that made me feel so free and so able to make my own decisions. Here you don't have the freedom of things like mountains and places to kind of disappear, and yet you do have the freedom of the fact that you can just walk around the streets, that you can get around incredibly easily even if you don't have a car. And we definitely blend our kind of social lives here with connecting with South Africans, because there is always something sort of reassuring about that, and one can talk about the same kind of journey that they might have been on, but also it's so lovely to, for example, be good friends with our neighbors and to actually really speak Dutch and to find out about the culture here and about social niceties and around things like, you know, how one maintains a little garden in the Netherlands, because it's very different. I mean, so much is so different. And I feel in some ways, I arrived just before I turned 49. And in some ways, it's quite hard to sort of almost have to relearn so much. That sense of familiarity that you don't even consciously think about, you know, the route, the quickest route to the shop, the quickest route to school, who your person is that you would go to have your hair cut, or your favorite doctor or dentist, and things like if suddenly you have a plumbing issue, you know exactly who to call, or if you don't, you can ask somebody else. Here, everything is new. And that I find a little bit hard, and as we say in Dutch, echt vermoeiend. It is tiring.
Okay, now let's get to Dutch. Jij spreekt wel wat Nederlands, and yet you grew up in Pietermaritzburg, very much an English girl, going to girls' high school. How easy was it for you to pick up on the Dutch? Want nou kan je wel wat spreken, niet goed. Of dan heel veel beter dan ik het kan, and that's also why, just by the way, I'm not going to continue with Dutch. You're going to laugh at me, but I mean, the point is just that you actually made an effort. It's great. You actually do. I mean, the other day you were in a magazine and you did an entire interview in Dutch, and I thought, whoa, Kari, that's pretty awesome.
I think that I mean, the crazy thing is that I had this sort of English upbringing, and yet I always had a sense that actually I didn't have one iota of English in me. And in fact, we did our DNA tests about 8 months ago, and I obviously knew that my dad was 100% from the Netherlands, so he moved.
He was knighted in the. He was knighted in the Netherlands.
Yeah,
Hans Fransen, for those who don't know, Hans Fransen is a very well-known South African. Was a well-known South African historian. Sorry, I interrupted you now. Yes, yeah.
No problem. And then we did our DNA tests, and I discovered that even on my mom's side, because my mom was volledig Afrikaans, and my roots are 100%, literally 100% Northern and Western European. So even on my mom's side, and so and I was never afraid of Afrikaans. I know that many of my counterparts always sort of used to talk about rock, they didn't even talk about Afrikaans. They sort of, it was sort of quite a sort of defamatory kind of way of terminology. I didn't particularly like it, but for me, I think partly it's because it's out of respect for the people around me. Although Dutch people speak fantastic English, and that's why people can get away with trying not to learn. But the other thing is that I have wonderful family here. My dad's family are sort of, there aren't a lot of them these days, but they are absolutely delightful and they love speaking Dutch with us. So both Alistair and I have tried really, really hard to continue to learn. And in fact, because Alistair would like to get a Dutch passport, you cannot do that without a full inburgering. So he's done 3 of his 5 exams, and there's spreekvaardigheid and leesvaardigheid and all sorts of things. So he is already speaking pretty good Dutch as well. And yeah, it's lovely, and people are always very grateful and thankful.
Speaking of Al, for those who don't know your hubby, you are, quite honestly, Kari, you're a vivacious, lovely blonde. Al is a quiet, gentle person. Did you find it more difficult to make the transition than you did?
I don't think he did. I do think that it's been harder for him to find a network of friends here than me. Because I am a natural networker. I'm always finding connections with and between people, and Alistair less so. But he very much came to the Netherlands with the intention of making it a success. And the interesting thing also is that he still refers to this as just being potentially an adventure. Rather than I think we will stay here, but we never really moved here sort of, turning our backs on South Africa in any shape or form. And obviously there are benefits and disadvantages to living that sort of dual kind of life, where you feel like you're not 100% Dutch, but you're also no longer 100% South African, or we are 100% South African, I guess, but our lives are somehow sort of straddling both countries, and that's wonderful, and it's also really hard.
And your kids, because I mean, you have 3 kids. I don't want to go into too much detail there because they have privacy to protect, but you do have 2 beautiful daughters and a son. How did they make the transition, and how did they take your decision to move?
They for Julia, it was really hard. She's the second daughter, and she had been in a relationship for 1.5 years already. She was very young, but it was a lovely relationship with a really delightful boy. And so when we arrived, she was very, very, very upset because now she was missing him. And for about 5 weeks, she was incredibly down, and she was trying to keep this relationship going, and he was trying to extract himself. Chloe was in grade 11 at Westerford, so she felt very, that was really hard for her to leave such a wonderful school and such a wonderful set of friends. And Dylan was, at the time, he was 10, turning 11. And he went to the taalschool here, and after 2 months we spoke to them all, and we said, how are you feeling? What do you think about living in the Netherlands? And the funny thing was that Julia was the most positive, so she was the one who said, she says, I don't know why we didn't move here sooner. Because she'd got over the breakup. She actually, because she is a free agent. really. And so she just loves the fact that she doesn't have to ask us for lifts anywhere. She just gets herself around and about. And then with Chloe, interestingly, of course, when she would have been in matric last year, and I think she has felt better now that she's realized that her matric year would have been such a strange year anyway. It would have been robbed of so
COVID would
many
have
rites of passage.
exactly, yes.
She would have hardly been at school. She wouldn't
Yes.
have had a matric dance. She wouldn't have had a normal valedictory service. And so I think she sort of felt a little bit more at ease with the fact that we were here, because she felt like she wasn't robbing herself of too much. And for Dylan, it's been hard. At the Taalschool, he's surrounded by a lot of children who don't speak English or Dutch, really. But he's about to start at a Dutch middelbare school, which is like high school.
Yeah.
And so I'm really hoping that it will be his opportunity to make good friends. And of course, it has been so hard because we moved into our own permanent house on the day that lockdown started last year.
Yeah, you actually.
So the timing was appalling.
It was absolutely appalling. I do remember seeing on Facebook that there was a welcoming party where your neighbors put a cake literally on the border of your two properties and kind of waved from the other side, which is completely bizarre. Kari, that's basically. I appreciate you taking time to chat to us, and just lastly, I mean, small things like we did mention, music and everything like that. The Netherlands is supposedly a place where all of these cultural and arty stuff is in abundance. Yes, it is COVID, but is that something that you are beginning to find there that is joyful for you?
Oh, absolutely. I actually happened to join an expat choir called Sing Out 2 weeks before lockdown started, and although it's an expat choir with an Australian a choir mistress, there are Dutch people who are part of that group as well, and we've never actually rehearsed since then, but we still have online Zoom meetings every now and again. And then in August last year or July last year, when things had eased up completely again, but the singing still didn't continue because that's regarded as one of the most high risk activities you can do. Yeah.
Absolutely, and spreading your breath.
Absolutely, yes, spitting at everybody's faces. But I joined a little orchestra called De Bazin de Meren. And I just love it because I know it sounds so twee, but really just music is a universal language. And it is so part of my being that even though nobody ever speaks English to me there, when the conductor is explaining what we should be doing or cracking a joke or whatever, I completely get it. And it doesn't matter that my home language is completely different from all the people around me. We still make beautiful music together, and people are still appreciative of my contribution. And we also haven't been able to practice much of the time, but I go back to my next rehearsal again next week because we are finishing our summer holidays, and our first concert is in just over a month's time, the first concert that I'll take part in. So I'm really excited about that. Right. And of course, Tivoli Vredenburg in Utrecht is a most wonderful concert venue. And we have already seen some fantastic musicians, but I cannot wait to get back to hear more.
Wonderful. I've got one last question, and that is just, I know that you guys planned the trip very well and everything like that. You went out there looking for a job, got it and everything like that. I guess it is something that we should just say before you try to make a move like that, do know what you're in for, because I think that had helped you. Am I correct?
Absolutely, yeah. I do know very specifically of a family who did not do it that way, who literally between the first notion of moving to the Netherlands and actually arriving was just 6 weeks. And I think that they are still reeling, and that was over a year ago. I think that I don't know if they will ever really feel settled, because it was all done in such a rush. So it really is something that one has to think about long and hard, and really think about all the factors that, and it's not to say that one might make the decision not to do it. It's just that somehow you need to have thought about things, and need, because you don't want to arrive here and suddenly realize that you chose the wrong town, or you'd never really thought about where the school would be in relation to where you lived. And so,
and also just it's different. I mean, it is so
it
different
is.
from South Africa.
Yes, it
Am I
is,
correct?
absolutely. And you're not going to be going everywhere generally in a car, certainly not to start with. You're going to have to get used to using public transport, and walking and riding. And I mean, there's such hilarious stories you can sometimes hear about people attempting to, you're sometimes buying something that's a little bit too big for the bicycle. And I've heard people of stories sort of balancing a TV at the back of their bicycles, or where you've done groceries and it doesn't fit into your panniers. So you have to somehow have things balancing on your handlebars as well. So but it's good. It's good, and it's all part of growth and learning. And not only is it good for us, but it also makes us realize that there's so many things to be grateful for back home.
I'm so glad about that. Kari, thank you for taking time to speak to us. Please send my love to your lovely family.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it's lovely to chat to you.
Thank you, and have a great time there in Utrecht. Goodbye.
Thank you, and please come and visit when finally you can.
That sounds like a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Go well, Kari.
Okay. Bye, Isak. Bye.